but denying its power. There is this sense in which Paul says there's going to come a day when the most terrible traits of humanity are practiced everywhere, but where everybody thinks they're great at the same time. You know, that really is a dangerous thing. When you get someone that is evil, that'll just say, yeah, I'm a pretty messed up dude. Okay, at least you see it. But when you get people that are evil, that pretend to be spiritual, and that's not brand new, that's happened for a long time, but ever increasing, perilous. There is a danger there to a form of godliness that does not affect and change people's lives. They know things about God, they say things about God, they think things about God, but they do not, in fact, live for God. They live their own life, their own way. They don't live a crucified life Christ's way. You guys understand that? And so Paul would say, in the last days, these dangerous times will come. I remember a few years ago, more than a few, how long ago was this? 12, 13? I was working on the side of a house. It was very tall, it was 2-story, and then a huge, very steep roof, like a 12-pitch, very, very steep. And so I would have been at attic level. You guys know my house, right? All the way up there. But it was also built on the side of a hill. So the ground kind of fell away. And we were repairing some metal trim at the very peak. And I was up on not one lift of staging, not 2, not 3, but 4. And a 4, I believe, is the limit where you got to like attach to the building, because at that height, if you're not level and you kind of shift your weight, that whole thing can fall off. And I remember going up there, and I was being as cautious as I could. It was a small job, but just because it was high, you know, we'd slated basically a whole day to do it. And I got all the way up to the top, and I took a step on one of the staging planks. You know what happened? It was cracked. I didn't know it. And that staging plank broke and fell all the way to the ground. Luckily, I had one foot on another staging plank that wasn't broken. What made that situation so dangerous? I thought that I could step there. It could have killed my life. I shared that with my foreman, who was down on the ground. I said, oh, guy, right? You guy down there, did you look at this plank before you put it up here? Because if you have a crack in your planks, you got to bring them out of the cycle, right? You got to inspect your planks. And he said I was all set, but I was not all set. In the same way, these days are perilous. There's a form of godliness, but people deny its power. Where you see a churchgoer with an unchanged life, the problem is not God, is it? It's often not even what they're being taught. The problem is within that person. And that is indeed very dangerous, to grow comfortable and callous to the voice of God while thinking at the same time that you know him. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a churchgoer, but as we consider our culture as a whole, people think they're awful good. They think they know a lot, but they're unchanged and they're not born again. They're walking in deadness, not newness of life. Now, we'll just go a little further. For of this sort, verse 6, are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. This is a characteristic of both men and women in these perilous times. Notice verse 7, always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. It almost seems like an oxymoron. Always learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. They're always learning, but nothing is changing. We don't have to be those kinds of people. Now, as Jannes and Jambres, those would be Pharaoh's magicians, right, that threw down their staffs, which turned into snakes, which Moses and Aaron, when Aaron threw down his staff, when Moses and Aaron came back to Pharaoh and said, let God's people go, they resisted Moses. Now, as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, those two magicians of Pharaoh, so did these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds disapproved concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. We live in a day where people can see God's work. Romans tells us they can. People can see the work of God. Jannes and Jambres observed as Moses came to Egypt, and first, guys, you guys know the plagues, right? We're not going to go through all 10 of them, but we can do the first 3, right? There was blood. The Nile River turned to blood. Even when they dug outside of the Nile, blood, they could not find groundwater that was not blood, right? And then the second one, boink, 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 boink. 2, come on, frogs. Frogs. And the magicians somehow, demonic or sleight of hand, made some frogs of their own, right? Something funny, Brian? Rabbits. No, Josh. Not rabbits. Yep. Sorry, I'll have to change my... That's good. Okay. Blood and frogs, right? And then the third. Lice, fleas, lice, right? Whatever it was, but itchy, scratchy, right? Do you remember what these two magicians said after just the third plague? This is the very finger of God. And after the fourth plague, I think was boils. Pop, 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 right? Was it fourth was boils? Can you help me out? I think so. Okay, after the fourth plague, they couldn't even stand before Pharaoh. They're like, let the people go. Let the people go. Man, we can't do anything to this God. And yet they never served him. They never turned their hearts towards him. They resisted him, even though they knew his power. They would not be changed by it. They would not go out into the wilderness with this new nation. And I believe they lost their firstborns along with Pharaoh. Even though God spoke clearly to them and said, if you do not put blood, the blood of a lamb, above your lintel, your firstborn son will die. Isn't that mind-blowing? These very intelligent, very advanced men who saw the power of God, but resisted him to the bitter end. And it happened in their day, and that's the example that Paul will use as he's teaching Timothy, a pastor. But this is true, especially in our day. People are fiercely resisting God. And you know what? When the Lord comes back for his church and we're out of here, and the Holy Spirit, which is in us, is suddenly really in no person on the whole earth, that's how dark it will be. And there's no restraint to evil because we're gone and the Holy Spirit is gone. A man will rise, the Antichrist, who will defy God and be the focal point for all of humanity that hates God and wants to resist him. They despise his judgments, they despise his consequences, and they will rally together with this man to fight against the Most High. But it's not that they don't believe in him. For they will hide in the rocks and crags of the earth, in caves, and shake their fist at heaven. And they'll call him by name. Revelation tells us that. It's not that they don't know that he's real. It's that they refuse, and this is true in this day, they refuse to bend the knee to him and to his anointed, Jesus Christ. So that is a reason that I believe we live in the last days. There are many other things said about how God measures time morally in the New Testament and examples from the Old, but I think Paul lays it out well to Timothy there in 2 Timothy chapter 3. All right, let's get into tonight's study.